We
Yeah?
are
Not yet.
live.
Not. It doesn't say live yet. It still says off air on mine.
Wow.
There we
Maybe I'm.
go. Now it says live.
Hey.
All right. All right. All right. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, animals of all varieties, not antelopes this week. Animals of all varieties. This is the MMAniacs podcast with Nick David.
And freshly rejuvenated Nick David and a somewhat rejuvenated me, Matt Kona. Hey,
Yes.
hello.
I am just getting over my little bout of pneumonia, which has, seriously kicked my butt. I was in bed for 4 days completely, where I just didn't get up, and 2 of those 4 days I couldn't even, maybe even 3 of them, I didn't even have the energy to lift my head to watch like a fight or a television program or anything. I just was so, it really kicked my ass. I think as you get older, these things tend to be take a little more out of you. So I'm glad to be mostly back. I'm still, getting I have the remnants of it, just the bare end of it, but it's mostly gone. I went to jiu-jitsu today for the first time in almost 2 weeks. So that was good. It felt good to get back on the mats and train a little bit and choke some people out. It's nice to be able to do, so you don't do it in real life. That's one of the benefits of jiu-jitsu, is you get to choke people on the mats, so you don't do it in real life and then go to jail, unfortunately.
Yes, well, good. Well, it's much harder to podcast with you from jail.
Yeah, it would
if
be
that were the
difficult.
case.
Hello, you're receiving a call from Valley Street Correctional Facility. Will you accept?
Yeah. Uh, good call.
Although I
And it's
bet
also,
people would tune into that. That'd be interesting. I'd have to talk about fights. I had no idea what was going on because I wouldn't. I'm sure you can't watch fights in jail. I'm sure.
well,
There's probably. I doubt they would let you watch. They would let you watch fights. Yeah, maybe some jails you could watch it in, but I bet most jails you probably couldn't watch fights in.
that's probably a pretty good bet. Although you could break down all the fights that you see in jail and tell them to me.
There you go. You should have seen it. It was Johnson versus Smith. It was unbelievable.
The Jello
You're fighting over
Championship.
a cookie. Yeah, you're fighting over Jello. That's right.
Jello. Oh, which not to start things off on a weird note, but I learned that Utah is the #1 consumer of Jello in, if not the country, the world. They love Jello there,
Huh. They
and
love
specifically
Jello and
putting
multiple
vegetables
wives.
in it. The UFC has finally announced their return. Not really a return, but it's their second attempt at doing a fight card in Utah, and they've only announced one fight so far. It's for the main event, and it's Bruce Leroy versus Yair Rodriguez, which
okay.
Luke Thomas pointed out on his show. It's a good main event of 2 featherweights. It's a little strange to have in Utah since it's pretty white there, and those are 2 guys who can speak English and Spanish. So you'd think that they could do media. They could do media in 2 different languages, but it's really they only have to do it in their second language.
I didn't realize
in
Bruce Leroy spoke
Utah.
Spanish.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep. So he's not a native Spanish speaker. They're both living and training in the U.S., of course, but of Spanish descent. Bruce Leroy, of course, is not his real name. Is it? Fuck it up, but it's easier to say.
Alex Caceres.
Caceres. It's easier to
Alex
pronounce.
Caceres, yeah.
Easier to pronounce and more fun to say. Bruce Leroy.
Right.
But he had. I know you didn't see it. I think it was on the prelim of a recent fight card. He had a very impressive late notice performance in what was originally at UFC 199, which was originally supposed to be BJ Penn versus Dennis Seaver. Both of those fighters were replaced by Cole Miller and Alex Caceres. Caceres came in on later notice and
I saw that
fought
fight
very impressively. Oh, you did? Okay,
yeah, I did
cool.
see that fight. That was a great fight. Yeah.
So I'm excited. Yair Rodriguez, of course, had an incredible jumping knee knockout of the alpha male guy with the weird neck tattoo. Not the alpha male guy with the weird neck tattoo you're thinking of. Not Cody. All right, great. Start off right on the forgetting two names of Andre Touchy Feely. Andre
Oh,
Touchy
yes.
Feely.
Yes,
And
yes.
that also great fight. So I'm excited. I'm not excited maybe enough to travel to Utah, but so this
But
is
we
the
are
UFC
excited enough to travel to.
Rocks, baby.
Yes. All
Home
right.
of the NBA champion Cleveland Cavaliers, who just completed an epic Game 7 comeback this past Sunday night over the defending champion Golden State Warriors. So they mirrored Stipe Miocic.
Yes.
Uh,
Stipe's opened the floodgates for championships in Cleveland. So
is going to be part of the Cleveland Cavaliers parade too, which is pretty
oh,
sweet.
nice.
So that's going to be really fun. We just bought our tickets today, so we'll
that's
be
our
that.
announcement. The MMAniacs will be covering the Cleveland event live, and I know some
September
of our
10th.
we're going to have some of our friends from LCCT Schaumburg will be there because Ben Rothwell is on that card as well. So we'll get a chance to say hi to those folks and maybe get a couple of quick interviews while we're there.
Definitely. We'll record some podcasts, hopefully check out the Cleveland comedy scene, and maybe some Rock and Roll Hall of Fame field trip, perhaps.
Yeah, I think, you know what? I think we should go a couple of days early and then get all those yayas out. And then we can do some, kamikaze ambush podcasting on people once we find out where everybody's at.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. This is the UFC's first appearance in Cleveland, so there's a lot to be excited about. UFC 203, September 10th. Stipe Miocic versus Alistair Overeem. Co-main event: Ben Rothwell versus the man who lost his title to Stipe, Fabricio Verdun.
Those are both crazy good fights. So I'm excited about both those fights. Speaking of not to jump around. But I just
jump up, get down.
I will. I never ate a pig as big as Pop, but he had a Terminator like Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I was listening to the new Unfiltered UFC Unfiltered. Did you catch that?
I did. Right, it's a new podcast that it's hosted by Matt Serra and
Jim Norton.
The first
Which is a
one
perfect fit. It's a really good fit.
Sponsored because they both look alike and have similar New York accents. Yeah.
Nah, just like a really.
I know they're good.
Jim Norton is on the more knowledgeable side of comedians as far as mixed martial arts go, and Matt Serra is on the funnier side of mixed martial artists. So I think it's a good fit. Obviously Matt isn't as funny as Jim, and Jim doesn't know as much as Matt as far as MMA goes, but I think that I'll be interested to hear how their chemistry evolves over the course of this thing. And I'm excited to have another podcast, especially one that's going to have so much inside because it's put out by the UFC. They're going to make sure that they have all the most current information all the time.
Although I feel like Jim asked a couple of dumb questions that they could have found out, like when is this fight or something. But anyway, I enjoyed it. I thought they had good chemistry. It was a fun listen. But go on.
The whole point I wanted to make was that one of the most exciting fights to me on UFC 200 isn't even being announced in any of the fights, and that's Travis Brown versus Cain Velasquez. That could be a headliner fight on any. That could be a pay-per-view. That could be a pay-per-view headline fight. It's buried down in this card. So I'm really excited for that fight. I'm excited to see Cain get back in there.
Second fight, I think.
Yeah, I'm excited to see him get back in there, and you know, I'm a big Kane fan, and I think that he's going to get to the top of the heap again, and I think he'll grab that strap and hang on to it for a little while. I think he's gonna be the guy to break that two fight win streak for UFC heavyweight champions. I think he'll be the dude that's able to hang on to it for a little bit longer when he gets it this time.
You know that Travis Brown versus Cain Velasquez is not a heavyweight championship fight. He needs to do. There needs to be a lot of things that happen to get to that point. Because
yeah, it's not far. It's not far. Cain Velasquez is at the top of the heap. It's only going to have maybe one other fight before he gets to a championship fight. It might be this one if it's a decisive enough victory. If he trounces Travis Brown, you know, just totally puts a beat down on him, he could step right up to the front of the line. If he puts on a really good performance, and let's say, you know, let's say at 203 that you'd think Fabricio Verdum versus Ben Rothwell would be kind of a title eliminator. One of those guys would get the next fight. If that's a stinker of a fight, and then the Velasquez fight is a total badass fight, I could see him stepping over them and getting the next title shot. But at the very least, he's only one more fight away from getting back in the title shot. I mean, I think regardless of his last performance against Verdum, he's still pretty highly touted as the top heavyweight happening.
Here's my thoughts on that. His performance against Verdum was when he lost the title in the unification bout in Mexico City, and he did not look good. You could say it was the altitude or not training at altitude, but it could also be the fact that he just hadn't fought in so long. Combined with that, they were supposed to rematch. It didn't happen. He had another injury. I feel like the UFC needs to have Cain demonstrate that he could get through a couple of training camps healthy. That's why I think that he has to fight one more fight if he defeats Travis Brown heavyweight championship. And I think one other thing that is in his way is the possibility of the other big heavyweight fight on the card. I know it's an unranked fighter against a fighter who's lower ranked than Cain, but Mark Hunt versus Brock Lesnar, that could cause some big waves in either way.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Lesnar got his shot at the title, his second fight in the UFC, just based on his name alone and based on the fact that people are gonna buy pay-per-views to watch him. So that's a possibility. It's a possibility. It's very true. He could, if Lesnar makes short work of Mark Hunt, or just beats him, period. I think regardless of how well he does it, if he beats him, you're right. He could step over everybody and get the next shot just because of who he is and his name. So you're right. I mean, he's definitely one of the top, you know, 3 biggest draws, if not the biggest draw the UFC has ever seen. So, and they're definitely in the game of making money. We've seen that many times before, where they're trying to not necessarily put together the best fight possible, but the fight that will garner the most income. So
yeah,
which is that's their prerogative. That's their prerogative. They have pretty much have the market cornered as far as the fight game goes. Nobody can really compete with them. They don't have the depth or the breadth of fighters, and nobody has the ability to compete with them, really. So they can do whatever they want to do. The UFC can do however they want to do it. And if that means Brock Lesnar stepping over people so they can make money, it won't surprise me at all.
Yeah, and I think that it's. I mean, you make a good point. The money, the numbers that matter are the ones next to the dollar symbol and not next to the column that says rankings.
Right. Exactly.
I think that sometimes I don't mean to nitpick on the wording. That it's sometimes the rankings are a flawed system. They're all based on, ironically, they're based on media, and there's a list of the media that submits to them, and it's weird. It's kind of a weird listing of media. It's not the main. It's not Sherdog. It's not MMA Fighting. It's not Bloody Elbow. It's not a lot of the sources that I read and get accurate reporting from. It's
You're talking
weird.
about the UFC rankings.
Correct.
Okay.
So that's what, because the UFC is using their own rankings next to their fighters. I know that ESPN has their own separate ranking system.
Right.
Sherdog has their
I
own.
like to follow Sherdog ones because Sherdog incorporates all fighters from all different, all the different organizations. While it's mostly dominated by UFC fighters, you're gonna in all of the rankings you're gonna find 90 to 95% UFC fighters and 5 to 10% fighters from other organizations. Right. But it's nice to see somebody that's taking these other fighters into consideration, and they don't have a dog in the fight. That's the thing with that I feel with the UFC rankings, is that they have a dog in the fight and how they rank people, and it has, their revenue depends on it. You know, their revenue can be affected by how people are ranked and how the appearance of things. So that's the thing I like about Sherdog. They don't have a dog in the fight. They're not trying to promote one person over another person. They're just trying to find the best. You know, they're just doing it by whatever their process is. I don't know what their process is. I don't know how they.
But I'm just saying, the rankings are by the media and not the UFC, but they're the ones that are used by the UFC, and so it makes sense that to even have them when they're not paying attention to the rankings when it comes to making the fights. So, but I think that they could still make good fights when it's a lower ranked guy. I mean, for instance.
So wait a second. Hang on. Let me stop you for a second. The UFC doesn't do their own rankings?
They don't.
Huh. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, I had no idea that. That's news to me.
It's really bizarre, the list of people that they use. There are radio stations, Yahoo News sites, all these things, and they're cumulative, used and ranked in order and used by the UFC, but it's not executives from the UFC choosing who is ranked where. It's basically
right.
just
So, but the UFC curates all this information from all these other sites and media outlets, and then they use that, and then the UFC uses that information to create the rankings.
What all the votes are, and they post them on the site. So it's a very confusing thing and bizarre in many ways. But Luke Thomas from the Monday Morning Analyst, MMA Fighting, where he read the list, and it was staggering just because I feel like these are not the sources that people are covering MMA in various ways, yet they're the ones that ended up largely affecting fighter pay. That's where a lot of media who have been asked to assign rankings, most notably John Pollock, a Canadian reporter from the MMA Report, a great podcast, refuses to participate in it because his fighter starts and stands in the rankings is affecting their pay and their livelihood, and he doesn't think that it's fair. So that's why it's weird to even have rankings if you're not going to use them, or if you're not going to adhere to them. If it's not always going to be number one against number two. Number one, I mean, there are guys. Tim Kennedy is still on the top 10 in his middleweight division, not in close to 10 years. Khabib Nurmagomedov was in the top 5
months.
Tim Kennedy has it 10 years. No, sorry, I meant 2 years.
Okay, 2 years.
Not 10 years.
Yeah. All right, 2 years. Okay.
It might as well have been 10 years. I mean, so much has changed in mixed martial arts.
I didn't
There's no
realize it had been
more.
that long since Kennedy fought. The last fight that I remember was the fight against oh Christ.
Was it the recently suspended Yoel Romero? Is that his
Yeah,
last
yeah.
fight?
So yeah. That was the last fight that I remember. That was the one where Yoel Romero wouldn't refuse to get off his stool, and he sat for another minute in between rounds, which he should have fucking been disqualified. That really bothers me. It still bothers me now. I get that. I get that the ref doesn't want to have to, give the fight over for something as stupid as sitting on the bench. But if you can't get up, if you refuse to get up, that's the end of the fight. You don't get to sit there for another minute and rest. And then he came out and knocked Kennedy out.
His last fight was September 27th, 2014. 2014, that was his last fight.
Okay.
178. So, crazy that it's been that long, and he's been healthy. He wants to fight. Yeah.
You can't always adhere to the rankings, regardless, because a lot of times people have just fought, people are injured, people are suspended, whatever. Case in point, who's going to fight Bisping?
Right. And that's one that I was leading up to in terms of versus the next ranked fight. I mean, honestly, right. he showed up on short notice. That's a division that has problems that he was filling a gap on, because Yoel Romero couldn't have stepped in. He's on suspension. Jacare couldn't have stepped in because he said he was injured. And that you could nitpick about that, about Jose Aldo didn't step in.
He couldn't step in because he's injured. Weidman supposedly injured. Rockhold just lost. So, right. That's the argument.
Well, I was speaking about stepping in for Weidman. Obviously, Rockhold is fighting in that, but Weidman had neck surgery.
I was talking about now, like who the next potential guy would be.
Granted, yes, and that's what makes it so wild, because the next guy could be the 13th ranked guy, Dan Henderson,
right?
Because that's a fight that would sell. That's a fight that's interesting to fans because they fought at UFC 100. Everyone still has the image in their mind of Bisping knocked out stiff, and then Henderson just landing on him with that giant coffin nail of a hammer fist. So, yeah. I mean, it makes no sense in the rankings for that to happen, but more people will put their money down on that than they would for a Jacare Souza Michael Bisping fight.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So that goes back to that same thing. It's a money thing, and it's a make sense thing. If all of these other guys can't fight or won't fight, then it makes sense, if they want to get Bisping back in there to defend the title sooner than later. And it was one of the things I thought was strange was immediately afterwards, within the couple days after Bisping getting the title, was he called out. It might have been the same night. He called out Henderson and said he'd like to get that fight. It's like that's such a weird thing to me. First of all, as the champion,
well, I think
you don't call people out. You don't call people out if you're the champion. If you are the champion, you should call out the first or second, not the 13th ranked guy who's in his late 40s. Who's in his late 40s, who is on his way out the door. But having said all that, I would love to see it, if for no other reason. I would love to see Henderson get one more crack at the title. And crack at a title, because I think he's done so much for this sport. And I've been watching that guy fight for pretty much 20 years now, and so I would love to see him get that opportunity. I don't think he's such a hot and cold guy. it's whoever shows up. So he could, if he loses one more fight, then he's got to fight 5 more, 6 more fights before he would get that title shot again. So I think now it would be a good time. I think that all the stars might be aligning for that fight to happen. It's a fight that makes sense right now. It might not make sense in 6 months.
No, and just to put a pin on that he didn't call him out that night. It was just brought up when asked about that. He's been on record saying he'll fight whoever they put in front of him, but there people will start asking him about intriguing matchups, and he basically just dismissed Weidman and Rockhold, saying, "Look, they're supposed to fight. They can fight each other. I'm going to be here with the belt. I'll fight Jacare. I'll fight Henderson. It's more interesting for him to fight Henderson." And I think he was critical about Jacare for not taking the fight. I mean, the reason that he had the opportunity to even win that title is because Jacare, who seems largely uninjured in his absolute demolition of Vitor Belfort, wouldn't take the fight on short notice. Right. So that's one of those things. And Dana White said it on his episode. He was the first guest of the Matt Serra, Jim Norton Unfiltered podcast. He said, you have to take those opportunities. Take the opportunity to step in for Rafael Dos Anjos, even after going out of his way to be on the record that he would fight McGregor anytime, anywhere, under any circumstances. So right. It's like you have to be ready to fight if you're a fighter and you want the big money fights, because otherwise people are going to pass you by even if you have that ranking. And even though Jacare is technically coming off of a loss against Yoel Romero, the thinness at the top of that division is the reason that Michael Bisping got the opportunity. And now for him to defend it, the only interesting matchups are people that don't make sense because of the thinness of that division. And now right. the big bombshell and what we could conceivably see, and this brings me into a newer point that I wanted to get your opinion on, is finally, after such a long layoff, it was announced this Monday on the MMA Hour. Nothing has been set in stone in terms of a date, but George St. Pierre has finally come out and explicitly said, I am ready to return to fighting. I'm ready to return to the UFC. And he said that basically been brought up in a largely fanboy type of way, fantasy booking. Michael Bisping versus George St. Pierre could be Bisping's first title defense. And
Jesus Christ.
Exactly. Isn't that crazy?
That's pretty insane. That's a pretty nutty one right there.
If you were given the opportunity to see Jacare, who is higher ranked, or even Yoel Romero, who will be back from suspension by the time Bisping is ready to defend it, of course, you would, if you polled 1,000 UFC fans, if you polled 1,000 casual fans, really, how many would choose Jacare over George St. Pierre, even though he's fighting a middleweight and not at welterweight? Yeah,
it'd be pretty thin. I mean, I can't even. And I'm a huge Jacare fan, but just the advent of getting GSP back in the octagon is enough for me. I don't. It's almost irrespective of who he fights, just to see him get back in the ring. But that's a really intriguing fight. You know, stepping up to middleweight. I don't know how I don't know how he would do against other, the cream of the crop in the middleweight division.
But is Bisping the cream? I know he's the top, but it's
no, he's. That's what I'm saying. If he beats Bisping, which I think he would do, how would he do against Jacare, Yoel Romero, Weidman, Rockhold? That's what
I think. I think that he wouldn't fight them right away. I think that he would try, because even though in the days before he announced his intentions, he said that he would come back for super fights. I mean, he left the
Right.
welterweight champion, and he would be coming back trying to claim the middleweight champion, which would be very claimable against Michael Bisping, even after all that time off, in my view. And also, it would be tremendously huge. This would be a fight that they would almost have to put at Wembley Stadium. Bisping wants to defend it in the UK. This George St. Pierre, it's not going to fit at the O2 Arena. You're going to have to go to a stadium for this. And so I think if he were to claim that title, then he would want to get the title that he never lost, even though against Hendricks, he didn't win that fight. But I think that he would try to unify or to get, not unify, but to hold two titles at once instead of defending the welterweight title. That's what I expect to happen.
Well, here's another consideration. It could be a non-title fight. It could be.
Well, he said that he would want it to fight for the title. I mean, it seems, I don't know why they would do that. I feel like if you have an opportunity to make
the
things
same reason
tasty,
that they would do Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor. It's a giant selling fight. It's a non-title giant selling fight. So
yeah, but you couldn't have done Diaz versus McGregor for the featherweight title, whereas you could do George St. Pierre against, because you could gain weight easier than you can lose weight. So that's the only little differential in my view on that. I think that they would, even though titles essentially are a fairy tale, as Nate Diaz says.
Yeah, I don't buy into that. I don't buy into that at all.
I know that you don't, and I know the common fans don't. But
it's a life-changing thing. When you get that strap, it changes your whole life. It changes
exactly. And if you leave a champion.
So it's not,
you want to return.
Not a fantasy thing. It means something. You're the guy that's at the top of the heap. You're getting the bigger paychecks. You're getting the media attention. You're getting the promotional attention from the UFC. It's not a fairy tale thing. It means something. It means something to be champion. And Nate Diaz is talking because he's trying to sell that fight, and that's why he says what he just said. But make no fucking bones about it. If Nate Diaz could be the lightweight champion, fucking right he would be.
Yeah, but Nate Diaz fighting for the lightweight championship is less of a paycheck, even if he won it, than fighting in a non-title match against Conor McGregor.
He fell into a fucking pot of gold. Nate Diaz fucking fell off a cliff and landed at the end of a rainbow by a fucking miracle and found the one thing that's going to make him a fucking millionaire. By luck, or by his mouth, rather, and his fighting ability. I'm not trying to take anything away from him as a fighter, but I'm just saying that he got the 1 in a million thing. It's almost never that you're going to make more money in a non-title fight than you are in a title fight. That's that's never the rule. That's very much the exception. And so finding these one-off miracle super fight things is much harder to do than to get a title fight and make money that way. So
it's not one off. He's fighting 2 fights in a row, and I'm venturing to bet, even though the UFC is a private company and they're not releasing these numbers, that these 2 fights individually, he's going to make more than a good percentage of the current UFC champions made in their last title defenses.
I wouldn't doubt it. Like I said, he fell off a cliff. He landed in a fucking pot of gold. He got the golden ticket. He won the lottery, all that jazz. He said just the right things to get the right amount of attention. And the right things happened. People got injured. Blah 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 blah, and he fell into the first fight, which was huge, and then for whatever reason, the second fight is happening,
and it's even huger, way huger.
Supposedly, we'll see if it happens.
What do you mean? We'll see if it happens. It's the. I mean, anything can happen. You pull out with an injury, but
booked as the main event for UFC 200. It's been told once, so. We'll
okay.
see if it happens.
That was a pretty particular. there's pretty particular circumstances on that one. I think that lessons have been learned, and this one is a go. They in fact just announced 2 days ago that part of International Fight Week, ironically happening the same day as the Fight Pass exclusive card of Dos Anjos versus Alvarez, Diaz press conference. They're gonna have the open workouts for UFC 200.
They're not doing it at the same time, right?
No, it's going to be earlier in the day. But I'm just saying the spotlight is once again taken away from Dos Anjos, who is still
fucking poor dude. Jesus Christ.
But I'm just saying, listen, I agree with you that I don't think that title belts mean nothing. But I'm saying that there are money fights that are bigger than title fights in some ways. And I'm not trying to nitpick or argue about a fight that hasn't been announced yet in terms of the actual having Bisping fighting George St. Pierre, but I would say it would be a title fight because that is it's a champion, a guy who left the champion, one of the greatest of all time that people recognize, George St. Pierre, fighting who will still be the current champion, Michael Bisping, provided that it happens within the next 6 months. And Bisping doesn't take a fight before then, which I don't think he will do. If he's going to wait for the big money fight.
For sure.
He's not fighting Belfort. He's not fighting Jacare.
That's the biggest.
Definitely
fight,
not fighting
Weidman. That Bisping could have. That's the biggest possible fight. That's bigger than a rematch with Anderson Silva. That's the biggest fight that Bisping could have right now. So why wouldn't he?
But I'm saying when you said it wouldn't be a title fight, that's why I was like, of course it's going to be a title fight. There's no way it wouldn't be unless St. Pierre doesn't make weight, but that's not going to happen because you're gaining weight to get up there. Anyway, that's the craziness of the UFC title picture is on display. The next 3 cards, I mentioned Dos Anjos, Alvarez. The following day, it's the rematch for the women's strawweight championship, Joanna Jędrzejczyk against Claudia Gadelha on the Friday. And then, of course, 3 title fights, the first time since UFC 33, which was kind of a disaster because all 3 title fights went the distance. I believe that they ran over on time in the pay-per-view. Will be happening at UFC 200 in the interim featherweight championship between Aldo and Frankie Edgar, and then you have the bantamweight between Miesha Tate and Amanda Nunes, and of course the unification of the interim light heavyweight championship and the light heavyweight championship, Cormier Jones 2. So there are 5 big title fights coming up.
I have a feeling that's going to be a much more competitive fight than the first one.
I do too.
I think that Cormier.
Wait, you're talking about Gadelha? No.
Yeah. Well, that one.
They're all rematches except for Tate Nunes.
Right. So I think. I mean, I'm not giving my picks out yet, but I think Gadelha's got a really good shot. I could definitely see her coming away with that title. I think she's worked hard and improved a lot. And that first fight was razor thin, and some might say she won it. I have to go. We talked about this on a podcast previously, and I said it before. I'll say it again. I still need to go back and rewatch that fight. I haven't done it yet, but I do remember it being razor thin. But I think Cormier has. I think he's put in the work. I think he's much more confident now. I think that mystique of Jones has been. Some of the shine has come off of that. I don't think
because of the OSP fight.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he didn't look great in the OSP fight. He certainly didn't look like the John Bones of old. He didn't look like the world beater that he has always looked like. It was a good fight, and he put on a good fight, but it was not the super dominance that he's exhibited in so many other fights. And so that coupled with the fact that we have a renewed Daniel Cormier who has nonstop training and fighting while Jones has been out. We'll see. We'll see. I think it's going to be a better fight than the first one, and the first one was a good fight. So I'm excited. I'm excited for that fight.
Okay,
I'm excited
so
for all
if
of
you,
200. I'm excited for that whole weekend.
yeah, what are we gonna do? We're gonna have to stagger some podcasts and put them out on the fight between fight days or something.
Right.
But how would you rank the make picks? But in terms of level of excitement, rank those 5 title fights. Where do you see it? I'll start it first. In terms of most excited to least excited.
Okay.
I would say I'm most excited for Cormier Jones too. That should be the no-brainer. It's the main event of the biggest card, possibly in UFC history. Secondly, I'm very excited for the Gedalia Jędrzejczyk rematch. I'm a fan of Jędrzejczyk. I think that you're right in terms of Claudia has improved quite a bunch, but so is Joanna. I mean, she just went through that 5-round war against Valerie Letourneau, who was finished by Joanna Calderwood in this past UFC Ottawa, which we haven't even gotten into yet, by the way. But we'll touch on in a little bit. So I'm excited about that one. Next, then I would say Dos Anjos Alvarez, then Tate Nunez, and for some reason I'm least excited for Aldo Edgar. I think that it seems crazy, but their first fight didn't necessarily blow my skirt up. I think Edgar will take it fairly easily. I mean, his boxing, he looked great against Chad Mendes, who recently got popped for a USADA violation. That's another thing we haven't even broached the subject on.
We don't know what it is yet.
Nah, but he came out on Twitter and just said he didn't do his homework. So I'm thinking that it was supplement based, perhaps.
Right.
So, but that could be 2 years. And I mean, he was already in no man's land when it came to where does he stand in the featherweight division. He's lost to McGregor and he's lost to Edgar. And there are guys like Max Holloway who are on a 9-fight winning streak. Where does he go? I feel like he's too big for bantamweight and he's way too small for lightweight. So Chad Mendes, maybe this 2-year layoff will, maybe he'll work on his hunting and fishing business or something.
Jesus.
It's crazy. These are the harsh realities of mixed martial artists. When you can't hone your craft because you're physically suspended from it, but at the same time, he was suspended by where do you go anyway? He was suspended by the law of averages, the numbers. He's a great fighter too. It's crazy. It's crazy that it's just a cruel the fight game. But anyway, Aldo Edgar. All right, so give me your rankings. You seem to a little taken aback.
My first one would be the same. Jones Cormier 2 is I'm the most excited for. My second one is Aldo.
Aldo Edgar, yeah.
Edgar. So that's my. I'm really excited to see that fight. I think that's that could be a main event on a lot of different cards. So I'm excited. That's probably my second most excited.
Probably a lot of different Brazil cards because those are the only ones.
Yeah.
That.
My third would be Gedalia Jędrzejczyk. My fourth would be Tate Nunez, and then the one I'm least interested in is Alvarez and Dos Anjos, because I don't think that Alvarez is in the same class. I think he's not ready for Dos Anjos. I could be proven wrong, but I think Dos Anjos is going to make pretty handy work of Eddie Alvarez, and so that's the fight that I'm least interested in because I feel like it's the least competitive won.
I mean, yeah, it could. I feel like we were both there to see Alvarez defeat. And granted, it wasn't an exciting fight. It was kind of a grind up
Yeah, it was a
against the
grinder. It
cage,
was a grinder
wrestle
of a
fest.
fight for sure.
But he's a smart fighter, Alvarez. At least he's gonna try to take away what makes Dos Anjos good, which is just his physical strength. He can hit you real hard. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and he's gonna try to take that away with lane and his dirty boxing. And I feel like we're not ready to break it down for the picks, but I mean that is the next card that's coming up, so I guess we could do
Right.
a little bit of a long distance preview, but it's not until July 7th. Thursday night card streaming exclusively on UFC Fight Pass. But
I have to look
I
at
don't
my,
know.
I want to look at my calendar for that weekend and see if I have.
I'm gonna be watching so much fucking TV and fights.
I don't have anything. 7, 8, and 9 I have completely open, so we're gonna have some sort of a UFC meltdown.
Oh yeah.
We're gonna have an MMAniacs UFC meltdown. I've got to wrap up pretty quickly here because I have a doctor's appointment to go to. But if you have anything else that you'd like to touch on, let's do that now. I can probably do another.
Okay, I'll bring this up.
So.
Watched on UFC Ottawa, and that was a pretty good night of fights. I know you haven't had time to break it all down because of your illness, but fight of the night was Steve Bosse against Sean O'Connell. Basically just a slobber knocker of a fist fight. That the biggest surprise was that it went to a decision, and it was a decision
it's pretty surprising.
But it reminded me a lot of a fight that happened 1 day before that was the Fedor Emelianenko return to Russia against Fabio Maldonado, in terms of we were just punching each other in the face. And
that fight was a travesty, and I was I'm so glad that I was sick and out in my garage when I was watching that fight, because I was literally screaming at the television. I was literally screaming at the ref, like, what in the fuck are you doing? Because Fedor was out cold. He was out cold, eyes rolled up in the back of his head, arms by his side, with Maldonado on top of him, punching him in the face. And then he punched him a couple more times and woke him up again. Yeah. That ref wasn't stopping the fight for anything. I was listening.
He was going to let him die.
I was listening to the Unfiltered, and that's what Dana White was saying. He was like, the refs were going to just let him die. Which is
it was a fight for the referee's life. Corrupt Russia, mob run craziness there. The ref was giving him every opportunity. It was just like pride fights in Japan.
Exactly. Exactly. You had the whole. Go ahead.
No. It's crazy home cooking, but Fabio Maldonado kind of punched himself out of it, and Fedor, even though he's on crazy legs, literally running away from him at some points, was able to get through. And at most, it should have been a draw. It's crazy that
it should have been.
It should
have been a 28. The one judge got it right. He gave him a 10-8 round, and then the next two he gave to Maldonado, which made it a 28-28 fight.
Yeah.
That's the
crazy
only guy
that was scored at 10-9, and it was actually a woman. But crazy.
It was right. The two other judges gave a 10-9 to Maldonado, and then gave a 10-9 to Fedor the next two rounds, winning him the fight. But it should have been a draw. It should have been. That was definitely. If that's not a fucking 10-8 round, what the fuck is a 10-8 round? If you can just beat a guy till he's unconscious, then beat him into consciousness again, and then beat on him again for another 3 minutes, how is that not a 10-8 round?
So basically, my question,
it's just, listen, as far as the MMA game goes, pardon me, but fuck Russia. Fuck Russia.
Absolutely.
Fuck their fucking refs. Fuck their promoters. Fuck their announcers. Fuck everybody that has anything to do with mixed martial arts in Russia. They set the game back 15 years. If that's what people are tuning into to watch, and they're seeing that guy, he's got brain damage. Say what you want about that fight. It was a great fight. Yeah. He's fucking slurring his words right now. I'm telling you. That guy got the shit beat out of him. His brains were knocked out on the fucking floor. And that's what pisses me off. That's what makes me angry. Fuck that it was a good fight. I don't want to fucking see that. I don't want to see that. Shit doesn't interest me at all. I'm interested in the sport of mixed martial arts. I'm not interested in seeing people lose their facilities and lose their ability to keep track of fucking time because they get hit too many times because the shithead fucking ref is trying to make sure that Fedor wins, giving him every opportunity to make sure he wins. Fuck, I don't want to see him win. I want to see that fight stopped, and I want to see him to be able to continue being a friend and a father and a husband and whatever other adjective you want to put in front of the dude.
A functional human being.
A functional human being. That's much more interesting to me than making sure he has his hand raised at the end of the fight.
I think you said it. You said it real well on Twitter. You wish he just never came back from retirement, and so my the question leading into this, unfortunately, was after this, which was his only fight under EFN under contract. Will he finally make it to the UFC? And he even said himself that his ever been to becoming a part of the UFC roster. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see him fight ever again. And so that's basically. I just wanted to end the podcast with saying, what do you think is next for Fedor, and what do you think is next for Rory McDonald? Because on the complete opposite side of the coin, when you say you want to see good mixed martial arts, that is what the main event of UFC Ottawa was. It was Wonderboy Thompson against Rory McDonald.
Really
Wonderboy put on a show. I mean, it was even though I think that Wonderboy soundly won every round, one judge somehow scored 2 rounds for McDonald. McDonald, I don't know where he goes from here. He's got a problem with his nose, where he's been broken so many times.
Yeah, his nose is fucking hamburger meat, man.
He hit it with with the wheel kick, and he barely hit it, and it was shattered and broken again. He's broken it in training, and now he's out of his UFC contract. I don't know if he goes to Bellator. I kind of don't want to see him go there, but he's such a great fighter, but that is a button.
Well, I would really like to see him get somewhere where he could be at the top of the heap and be the champion. I think he could definitely do that in Bellator, 100%. I just think that there's something that's keeping him from being the champion in the UFC, and it's him. When he first burst on the scene and GSP was still the champion, I was like, this motherfucker could beat GSP. That's how I felt about him at the time. And I'm a huge GSP fan, but I was like, this dude is the fucking next big thing. And then it seems like over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, he has gone from, he just had that just crazy killer instinct to playing a much safer game. And I know that that is a lot of Firas Zahabi's game, is being very smart about how you fight and really, and it's a similar thing with Greg Jackson. They create more cautious fighters, which is good for the fighters, but not necessarily good for the game. So it's. Part of me misses the Schlabberknocker fights, and I mean, not that I don't. I love watching a really technical fight, I really do. But when you see openings that are like, that was it, that was the spot where you have to turn on the crazy. That's the spot where you have to go, all right, it's time to end this thing. And then you don't see guys doing that. And I see that a lot with guys from TriStar and a lot with the guys from Jackson Wink, where they're just they play a much safer game. For whatever it is, it's not saying it's a good or a bad thing. I'm just saying that that's what I've seen from both of those camps, a lot of. And so that's what I've noticed over the evolution of Rory McDonald, is because he's become a much more cerebral fighter and a much more thoughtful fighter. And so in many respects, that's a very good thing. And in some respects, his killer instinct has waned some. So, I don't know, man. I think I still think that guy could be the best that there is, but I don't think with I don't know if it's his mindset or his training or what it is, but I don't think the way he's doing it now, it's going to work.
He's almost in Chad Mendes territory. In terms of he's lost to the champion.
Where do you got? How many title fights can you get? How many times can you fight for the first spot, for the title, for the first spot? How many times can you get knocked back to second or third before you just go, all right, fuck this. I'm just hovering at second or third for forever.
Yeah, and you've lost to the champ twice. He's lost. It's Joseph Benavidez, Mighty Mouse Johnson. Right. He's the best guy, but he's lost to the champ twice. So there's no place for him there, and it could be there's no place for him in the UFC, and maybe he goes to Bellator and makes some money. And Koreshnikov, I think that would be an exciting.
Listen, I don't have a problem with guys going to Bellator at all, and especially I like seeing top-ranked guys go over there. Especially guys that are right there at the very edge of being the champion, but just can't complete that hurdle. So I think that would be a great. I think he's more of a company man. I think he's probably not going anywhere, but I wouldn't mind seeing that at all. I wouldn't mind seeing him going to Bellator at all. I'd love to see them bolster their. I'd like to see them be a little more competitive with the UFC, and even though it's with the UFC cast-offs, and I like seeing people get that second life, get that second chance at the glory that's a championship, and maybe it's not the UFC championship, but it's a fucking championship belt nonetheless.
Okay, one bonus question to leave it on. Speaking of which, because it's the opposite, and it's very rare, even though Alvarez was a big Bellator signee back in the day to UFC. The lightweight champion that never lost his belt, Will Brooks, is making his UFC debut against Ross Pearson as part of UFC 200 weekend. What do you see about that? Do you think that if could he prove himself? Does he shoot right to the title picture with a victory?
No. I don't think a win over Ross Pearson puts anybody in title contention. Where's Ross Pearson? Yeah. Is he even in the top 15?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know where Ross Pearson lies in the pantheon of the lightweight division. So, but I can't imagine he's in the top 10 for sure.
Oh no, I don't think so. And the lightweight division is full of killers.
Yeah, the lightweight division is fucking stacked, man. So I think it's going to be a few fights. I think it's going to be the same kind of road that Alvarez took. This is going to be his sixth or seventh fight in the UFC. So I think he's gonna need those fights before he can get into. I think he's got to start from the bottom, just like everybody else. He's got some sort of a leg up because he was the champion at Bellator, but
it's a whole new ball game.
It's a whole new ball game, and it's the most stacked division in the UFC. So there's no win over Ross Pearson, and then unless your name's fucking GSP, and then you get a title fight.
Yeah.
There's no win over Ross Pearson and then straight to title contention. There's a win over Ross Pearson, and then there's a win over 3, 4, 5 other guys, and then maybe they'll talk about it.
Yeah.
And dominant.
Yeah, but it's so interesting that you go from the UFC to title shot in Bellator immediately. I mean, I guess if you're Benson Henderson. He was a former champion, but he's been kind of out of the picture for a little while. But the river does not flow the same way from Bellator to UFC.
No, it doesn't. Not at all. I mean, if you ask the average mixed martial arts fan who Ben Henderson is and who Will Brooks is, you're going to get infinitely more people who know who Ben Henderson is. So that's what they're banking on, is that name recognition and that sellability. So it's all, the UFC is all a money game these days, man. It's all about what makes the most money, and I think mixed martial arts in general is like that. In the end, these companies have to make money if they want to stay afloat, and they want to find the best ways to make the most money. So hopefully,
especially if they're selling for $4.6 billion allegedly coming up soon. Zuffa.
It's so funny. Listen, it's so funny to listen. Like, I listened to the podcast, to Unfiltered with Jim Norton and Matt Serra, and listening to Dana White is such a shiesty motherfucker, man. He's such
no one can believe what he says.
He's such an evasive, like, it's like, all right, okay, one, that's bullshit. What you just said is bullshit. And then the next 6 things you said, you didn't answer the question. You just evaded it by going, listen, if you're with me, you don't have anything to worry about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Listen, I think that Joe Rogan knew about this long before, because he started talking about leaving the UFC 6 months ago. He's like, I don't know, my contract's up is up next month. Says my contract's up in July, and who knows, I may or may not stick around. But I think he knew that there were talks of a sale. And I think his allegiance is to Dana White, and his allegiance is to the Fertittas. And I think if he feels like some other corporation comes in and they start telling him what he has to wear and has to say, he's like, nope, I'm out of here. See you later. That's one of the fringe benefits of this job, is I pretty much say whatever the fuck I want, pretty much do whatever the fuck I want. I can book whatever shows I want around the UFCs and the towns that I'm in. I can say whatever the fuck I want on the podcast. He said a lot of things that were not in line with he wasn't towing the party line a lot of times on his podcast. He said things that were not necessarily derogative towards the UFC, but he's questioned the Reebok deal a lot. He's said some things that, and they give him free rein to do that. They haven't shut his, they haven't put any kind of censorship on him in that way. But I think he had an idea that this might be happening, and if he feels like he's not able to do what he wants to do, see you later. He's got plenty of other shit happening. He's got a whole comedy career that's killer. He's got the podcast that's going really well. He doesn't need to do this. He could stop doing everything right now probably and just live off his savings for the rest of his life. I'm sure he's worth something like fucking $30 million or something. So he's probably going to be all right. Anyways, I got to get going. I got a doctor's appointment.
And I hope you'll be all right after your doctor's appointment. All right, Nick.
This one's about my knee. We're going to go see how my knee's doing.
All right. Well,
knees, backs, elbows and arms, knees, back, elbows and arms, pneumonia. Hey, doc. All right.
One of the 8 limbs. All right. Well, this has been the MMAniacs podcast. Please get in touch at MMAniacs pod on Instagram at MMAniacs. On Twitter at MMAniacs on Instagram. All that good shit. Tell your friends. Share the video. Share the links. Stitcher. If you're listening, reach out to us. Let us know what you think. Like the fan page on Facebook, and we will talk more of UFC International Fight Week as it gets closer. For now, we'll see you next time.
Over and out.